The Trail of History. Lewis and Clark, Shep the Dog, and Fort Benton, Montana. When Lewis and Clark entered present-day Montana on June 1, 1805, they crossed from what is now North Dakota, near the confluence of the Yellowstone and Missouri rivers, and began one of the most dramatic legs of their journey. The confluence of the Missouri and Marias rivers was one of the most critical turning points of the entire Lewis and Clark expedition. The core of discovery arrived at what's now called Decision Point, near present-day Loma, Montana. They were faced with a dilemma: which river was the true Missouri that would lead them to the Rocky Mountains and, eventually, the Pacific? Most of the men believed the North Fork, the Marias, was the Missouri because it was muddy and resembled the river they'd been following. But Lewis and Clark weren't convinced. The South Fork, the actual Missouri, ran clearer, suggesting it came from snowmelt in the mountains. They paused for 9 days, exploring both rivers, taking notes, and engaging in debates. On June 8, 1805, they made their decision: the South Fork was the true Missouri. And they were right. This moment became known as Camp Decision. Ultimately, they correctly chose the Missouri River. Then they traveled 20 miles down the river to Fort Benton. Meriwether Lewis named the Marias River in Montana after his cousin, Maria Wood, of the Lewis and Clark expedition. On June 8, 1805, while exploring the area, Lewis decided to name the river Maria's River as a personal tribute. He even acknowledged that the river's turbulent and troubled waters didn't quite match Maria's pure celestial virtues, but he still considered it a noble and vital waterway. Interestingly, the Blackfeet people had already named it Bear River. But Lewis's naming stuck in the historical record. It's a small but telling example of how personal connections and sentiment shaped the map of America. Fort Benton grabbed my imagination the moment I arrived. There's a kind of gravity to the land, like it remembers. In June 1805, the Lewis and Clark expedition camped just a few miles from here, stuck at a moment of decision that could make or break their journey. They spent 9 days at the confluence of the Missouri and Marias rivers trying to figure out which way to the Pacific. I stood where they stood, right at the historic steamboat levee, and looked at the Lewis and Clark Memorial. Lewis, Clark, Sacagawea, and her baby, captured in bronze, their eyes fixed westward. The moment came alive for me. Front Street feels like a living museum. It hugs the Missouri River and holds onto its past with pride. I wandered past buildings straight out of the 1800s, the Grand Union Hotel, the I.G. Baker House, the Fort Benton Engine House, each one with its own story, etched into the brick and stone. Back then, this place buzzed with fur traders, steamboat crews, and gold rush dreamers. No wonder they called it the Chicago of the Plains. Founded by Alexander Culbertson between 1846 and 1848 for the Chouteau brothers, and named for Senator Thomas Hart Benton, this tiny town became the world's most inland port. I thought about those steamboats coming from St. Louis, over 3,000 miles, to get here. During the gold rush, Fort Benton became a hub not only of supplies but also of a military presence. And when the railroads came, the steamboats slipped into memory, and the town turned to ranching and agriculture in the Golden Triangle's fertile ground. Point. One of my favorite walks was along the 1888 Steel Truss Bridge, the first to span the Missouri River in Montana. Even after the river trade declined, Fort Benton found ways to endure. You can still feel that grit in the air. There's a wild slice of history here, Front Street's infamous, bloodiest block in the West, too. In the 1800s, it was a rowdy, deadly, and always bustling place. Saloons, gambling dens, brothels, you name it, it was here, open 24/7. Locals used to warn strangers: walk down the middle of the street and keep your mouth shut. A cavalry escort had to ride through just to let the marshal serve warrants. Now, that same stretch is home to coffee shops and museums. It's surreal. Staying at the Grand Union Hotel was like checking into another century. Built in 1882, it was the gem of the steamboat era, once considered the finest hotel between St. Louis and Seattle. The views of Missouri from my window, the period decor, and the Union Grill's locally sourced fare, it all wrapped me in a kind of frontier nostalgia. But with the soft beds and great hospitality, of course. Then there's Shep. His story is about the soul of this town. Back in 1936, when a sheepherder was brought to Fort Benton's St. Clair Hospital and later died, his dog, Shep, never left the station platform after watching the train take his master away. For more than 5 years, Shep met every single train, for a day, waiting for him to return through summers, winters, wind, and snow. He wouldn't be adopted, wouldn't be distracted, and just waited. Until one day in 1942, he didn't hear train number 235. He slipped on the icy rails and was killed. The whole town turned out for his funeral. His statue still stands on the levee, ears perked, forever watching. I stood beside it and felt this mix of heartbreak and admiration. It's more than a local tale, it's a reminder of what loyalty means. I climbed that bluff and stood at the top where Shep's memorial overlooks the town. There's something quietly powerful about being in a place that holds so much love and loyalty in its story. Just picture the wind coming off the river, the town spread below, and that simple name, Shep, spelled out in white stones, still catching the sun after all these years. Now on to Great Falls, which played a pivotal role in the Lewis and Clark expedition, arguably one of the most grueling and awe-inspiring chapters of their journey west. In June 1805, Meriwether Lewis first laid eyes on the Great Falls of the Missouri River. What he thought would be a single waterfall turned out to be 5 separate cascades spread over 18 miles. This meant the Corps of Discovery had to undertake a massive portage, hauling boats and supplies across rugged terrain for nearly a month. They battled prickly pear cactus, hailstorms, and even grizzly bears, what they called white bears, all while dragging heavy gear overland.